There is a silence that follows judgment, a silence that pierces more than words ever could. When people look down on you, they often do so not with confrontation, but with withdrawal, with a quiet that says everything and demands nothing in return. In the world of Stoicism, respect is not commanded through force, arrogance, or titles. It is cultivated through presence, character, and the subtle art of self-governance. Yet, too often, we sabotage our own stature in the eyes of others not because we lack intelligence or ability, but because we persist in habits that whisper weakness, shout insecurity, and stain our perception in the minds of others. These habits are rarely dramatic. They are insidious, quiet destroyers of dignity. They creep into our daily behavior like uninvited guests and slowly erode the fortress of self-respect from the inside out. And the Stoics knew this. They knew that a man is not judged by what he declares, but by how he conducts himself when no one seems to be watching. So today, we pull back the veil on 7 habits, terrible habits, that instantly make people lose respect for you, even if they never say it aloud. These are not simply social faux pas. They are deeper, reflective of inner states that the wise must learn to overcome if they are to walk through this world with head held high and soul unburdened. First, let us speak of complaining, a habit as common as air and twice as toxic. To the Stoic, every complaint is an admission of powerlessness. When you complain, you tell the world, "This controls me. I am at its mercy." Whether it's the weather, traffic, or the rudeness of others, the moment you give it voice through whining, you give it reign over your peace. Marcus Aurelius, that silent emperor, once reminded himself, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." And yet, most people hand their dignity to circumstances like gamblers throw dice. Complaining diminishes you because it reveals that you would rather point a finger than take responsibility. It is the anthem of the weak, the exhausted, the reactive. It does not invite respect. It invites pity and sometimes contempt. The second terrible habit is constant self-deprecation masked as humility. There is wisdom in knowing your flaws and being honest about your limitations. But when you habitually put yourself down, when every compliment is deflected with a nervous joke, when every achievement is dismissed with mockery, you are teaching others that your presence is not to be valued. You think you're being humble, but in truth, you're conditioning people to see you as lesser. The Stoic believes in humility, yes, but not in self-erasure. Seneca himself spoke often about the nobility of the soul and its divine capacity. You are not meant to become invisible in the name of modesty. Confidence is not arrogance when it is anchored in effort and self-awareness. And when you downplay your value, people listen, and they agree. The third habit that ruins your respect is interrupting or overtalking. Nothing betrays a restless ego more than the inability to listen. In a conversation, the person who speaks less, but with precision commands more reverence than the one who dominates with noise. Epictetus taught his students that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. He said, "Only speak if it improves upon the silence." When you interrupt, you don't just break a sentence. You fracture trust. You show impatience. You show that your desire to be heard exceeds your ability to understand. And people, instinctively, will not trust someone who cannot listen. Because if you cannot hear them, truly hear them, how can you ever respect them? And if you don't respect them, why should they return it? The fourth habit is seeking validation. That subtle hunger to be liked, praised, approved. It is the ego's addiction, and it shows itself in many ways. Fishing for compliments, showing off accomplishments, over-explaining your choices, or molding your words to please everyone. But in the eyes of the Stoic, needing validation is a form of slavery. The one who needs applause is owned by the audience, and that kind of person cannot be trusted with leadership, nor with depth. True confidence is silent. It does not beg for confirmation because it knows its worth, even when unacknowledged. When you walk into a room and feel the need to prove yourself, you've already lost. Seneca once wrote, "He who seeks approval is already conquered." Respect is magnetic, but only when it is rooted in self-sufficiency. Fifth on this quiet list of ruinous habits is gossiping, that seductive urge to speak of others in their absence, to trade their dignity for entertainment or temporary alliance. Gossip does not speak of others, it speaks of you. It reveals insecurity. It shows that you feel safer when others are smaller. It reveals a mind that cannot stand solitude, a soul that finds nourishment in other people's failures. And worst of all, it builds a reputation, because if you speak of them when they are gone, surely you will speak of me when I walk away. Gossip erodes trust, and without trust, respect is impossible. The sixth habit is neglecting your appearance and posture. This may seem shallow, but it is not. The Stoics believe that your outer life should reflect your inner order. Cleanliness, posture, the way you walk into a room, these are not vain things. They are messages. They tell others whether you take yourself seriously. They reveal how you value yourself. If you cannot take care of the vessel, why should anyone believe in the message it carries? Epictetus advised his students to present themselves with dignity, not for vanity, but because a disciplined life should be visible even in the smallest gestures. A bowed head, a slouched spine, a disheveled appearance. These tell the world, I am not proud of myself, and they respond accordingly. Finally, the seventh and perhaps most destructive habit, being overly reactive. Emotional impulsiveness is the mark of the undisciplined. When you snap at criticism, when you sulk after being corrected, when you let anger, fear, or anxiety dictate your words, you become a leaf in the wind, tossed and turned by every passing breeze. To the Stoic, mastery begins with restraint. There is no nobility in being ruled by emotion. Respect is born from the ability to remain calm when chaos erupts, to listen when attacked, to reflect before retaliating. A person who cannot govern themselves cannot lead others, cannot inspire, cannot be trusted in the fires of life. And so they're looked down upon, not because others are cruel, but because they see a lack of strength. And people, by nature, trust strength, not violence, not noise, but calm, rooted, silent strength. These 7 habits are not just social mistakes. They are philosophical fractures. They are symptoms of an untrained mind, of a soul that has not yet risen to its calling. And if you carry them, unknowingly, the world will respond in kind. Not always with harsh words, but with distance, with a look, with absence. And you'll wonder why the respect never comes. But it will not be because you lack talent. It will be because you lacked awareness. The good news? These habits are learned, and they can be unlearned. With discipline, with reflection, with philosophy, with will. The path to respect begins not with demanding it from others, but with becoming someone who respects themselves enough to rise above these invisible weights. But what most fail to realize is that habit number 4, constantly seeking validation, is perhaps the most invisible yet most corrosive of them all. For nothing erodes your dignity more than anchoring your worth to the opinions of others. Imagine a man who lives not by his own convictions, but constantly glances sideways, fishing for approval, nods, likes, claps, and applause. Not because he believes in what he's doing, but because he needs confirmation that he is enough, that he is acceptable, that he matters. And as Seneca reminds us, it is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, who is poor. And this craving for validation, this thirst for being seen, becomes a silent enslavement, chaining you to the ever-shifting winds of external approval. And when people sense that your self-worth is held hostage by their opinion, they instinctively lose respect for you. For nothing invites contempt faster than desperation for admiration. So instead, be like the Stoic sage, content, within, anchored by virtue and reason, unmoved by praise or blame, and you will find that people not only respect you more, but are drawn to the calm certainty that you carry. And from here we move to habit number 5, speaking more than listening, a subtle yet damning flaw. For the man who cannot listen is a man who cannot grow. He talks not to understand, but to assert, to dominate the air with his voice, drowning out insights, stories, and truths that could have made him wiser, better, deeper. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Learn to be indifferent to what makes no difference." And one such thing is the compulsive need to speak just to be heard. This habit reveals arrogance, insecurity, and a lack of discipline, and others see it clearly, even if you don't. Respect is earned in the silence between sentences, in the humble tilt of the head that says, "I don't know, but I want to understand." And those who master the art of listening will always be surrounded by those eager to speak truth to them. So, if you want people to stop looking down on you, speak less, listen more. And when you do speak, let it be with depth, clarity, and necessity, not noise. Now we arrive at habit number 6. Victim mentality, the poisonous root that makes you weak in the eyes of all. For when you paint yourself as a constant victim of fate, of people, of misfortune, you surrender your power, your agency, your sovereignty. And nothing repels others more than someone who always blames the world for their own condition. Epictetus taught that while we cannot control what happens to us, we can always control how we respond. And in this lies our freedom, our greatness. When you chronically complain, you send a message, I am powerless. And in doing so, you invite others to see you the same way, to look down on you not out of cruelty, but because you have looked down on yourself first. So abandon the chains of self-pity, embrace hardship as a teacher, and walk through the storm with a still gaze, knowing that the Stoic warrior is forged not in ease, but in endurance. And finally, we reach habit number 7. Lack of integrity, the silent assassin of respect. For no matter how intelligent, talented, or charming you may appear, if your words and actions do not align, people will smell the rot behind the mask. Seneca said, a good character, when established, is not easily overthrown. But character cannot exist where integrity is absent. If you promise and do not deliver, if you pretend to be what you are not, if your public virtue is a costume rather than your essence, then even if people smile at you, they will never respect you, and eventually, they will expose you. The Stoic man lives in harmony between what he says, what he believes, and what he does. His inner and outer selves are one, and this unity commands silent admiration. So examine your habits like a warrior sharpens his blade, with precision and honesty, not to impress others, but to live aligned with nature, reason, and virtue. For in this alignment lies true self-respect. And once you master yourself, you will find that others, too, cannot help but respect you, not because you demanded it, but because you quietly became the kind of person who deserves it. And now, as the dust settles and the final words of the 7 habits echo in the silence, let us draw our gaze inward and reflect, not with judgment, but with reverence. For the battlefield of self-mastery is not fought with swords and shields, but with awareness, courage, and the quiet but unrelenting discipline of introspection. There is a man inside every one of us, a version carved from virtue, forged in stillness, crowned with resilience, waiting to rise, not in noise but in clarity, not in arrogance but in balance. In the whispers of the ancient Stoics, we find a path not to perfection, but to presence. Seneca, in the stillness of his exile, wrote not of triumph over men, but triumph over the self. Marcus Aurelius, emperor of the world, knelt before his own heart nightly, writing words not to impress others, but to wrestle with the beast of ego. Epictetus, once a slave, taught the free that true chains are not of iron, but of unchecked impulses. The habits we explored, these 7 corrosive threads that unravel the fabric of respect, are not mere social missteps. They are spiritual fractures, and to heal them is not just to win back the gaze of others, but to return to the gaze of your own soul. Think now of the times you lied, not to deceive the world, but to hide from it. Think of when you sought validation not as affirmation, but as a desperate plea for identity. Think of how you complained, not because fate was unfair, but because you forgot your own power. This is not shame. This is awakening. The Stoic path is not a ladder to climb, but a mirror to face. Each habit dropped is not a loss. It is a return. A return to who you were before the noise, before the pretense, before the need to impress. A return to the essence that needs nothing but truth, discipline, and courage. And in this return, you do not become someone new. You remember someone ancient, someone sacred, someone unshakable. The man or woman who walks into a room not needing to be the loudest, the smartest, or the most admired, but the one who is whole, centered, and guided by principles. A person like that is never looked down upon. Even in silence, they are a pillar, Even in solitude, they're a lighthouse. So what now? What shall you do with all this? You shall not just think. You shall act. The Stoic does not wait for motivation. They obey reason. You rise in the morning not asking how you feel, but asking what is right. You speak not to be heard, but to bring clarity. You listen not for rebuttal, but for wisdom. You walk through the world, not trying to prove your worth, but to express your alignment with your highest self. And in doing so, the habits that once defined you, the laziness, the gossip, the ego, the victimhood, they crumble like ash in the wind. You will look back not in bitterness, but in gratitude for every moment of humiliation, every hard truth, every silent rejection, because they pointed you here to this very edge of your transformation. And now you see, people don't look down on you because of who you are. They do so when you forget who you are, when you become a slave to impulses, when you abandon your discipline, when you turn away from the quiet call of virtue. But now, you return, and as you do, you walk differently. You speak with intention. You hold your silence like a weapon, your integrity like a shield. And the world, in time, notices, not because you demand respect, but because you command it. This is the Stoic way. This is not about impressing others. It is about remembering yourself, about rising, not with noise, but with presence, about becoming not someone new, but someone true. And when that happens, when your life is no longer ruled by fleeting habits but guided by timeless principles, you won't care who looks down on you, because you'll be too busy looking upward, inward, and forward. That is the moment you win, not a war outside, but a peace within. And there, in that inner sanctuary of strength, calm, and unshakable clarity, you finally become the kind of person who is no longer afraid of being looked down on, because you no longer live beneath your own potential. You live above it, transcendent, anchored, free.